Yo, what's up, chat? What's up? Yo, Jenga, aquí on mute.
Yep.
Hola, hola,
Can
Andrea,
everybody hear
buenos
me?
días, ¿cómo estás? Yeah, I think we can
Buenas.
hear you. ¿Cómo estás, bro? Now,
Yeah, man. How are you?
I'm good, bro. How you been?
I'm doing great,
I've been
man.
good.
It's a nice Saturday.
Yes,
Uh,
sir. Yeah, yep.
Beautiful morning. Time to talk about Christology,
Yeah, today's we're gonna be talking about Christological positions, held in the church. You know what I mean? And
especially
some big.
currently on Twitter, since there's a lot of the daily controversy with the Eastern Orthodox. Now we're
Yep.
bringing in some Protestants and possibly even some Muslims concerning the Sacred Heart of Jesus and
Exactly.
apparent
So
heart worship.
exactly, there's a lot of controversy right now on Twitter talking about Catholics and we worship the same God as Muslims or whatever. um, which anybody who disagrees with this, right, is just simply wrong, because they don't understand certain concepts of faith anyway. But we can get into that in a minute. But I think me and Jake want to talk about first and foremost the Sacred Heart of Jesus, since it was like a big thing. It's this month that is going on, all of that. So go ahead, man. Go ahead. You can talk about it. What do you want to talk about exactly?
Right. So, as we already know, the Sacred Heart devotion, it had basically developed from St. Mary of I believe it's Calicoke. I could be wrong with my pronunciation of that, but anybody can search it up. The Sacred Heart devotions from St. Mary, and it's from her specific visions of Jesus, which caused the development of this devotion, right, and so on, to show the passion of Christ towards all men, right? Since the heart symbolically represents that which is love, that which the will desires the good, right? And this is seen obviously in the scriptures: love God with all your heart, and it uses it convertibly with mind and soul. So the heart is just symbolically in reference to the soul and its faculties, in which in Christ his infinite passion occurred in this manner in his human nature by union of the divinity. So this is why we actually give devotion to the Sacred Heart, because it's no regular heart. It's united hypostatically to the divine word, or to the divine Son, the second person of the Trinity, of whom we worship. And by this union, the infinite divine love is, in a sense, energized through the human nature, in which Christ also as man loves us infinitely. He doesn't love us merely uh, in a finite capacity, but also as God through the soul. So that's just a beginning intro to the Sacred Heart. And so because of this, we actually give devotion to his heart, and we worship it. We actually adore it as an aspect of him. Not simply only symbolically, but also in a real literal sense, his heart. And this is not something unique to his heart alone, in which it has more dignity than his other body parts, but we also may worship his hands and feet, his arms, etc., and so forth, his head. All of it is sacred by the manner of the union that is hypostatic, that is personal with the divine Son. Would you like to
Yeah,
add
much.
anything to that?
No, I agree with everything you're saying. I had Mason in the chat saying this though. Law of non-contradiction. We're debunked, bro. I ain't gonna lie. But no, that was good though. It was a good exposition. I want to get into in particular, for example,
Yeah,
a little bit of theories of like why we say we worship the same God as the Muslims pretty much, because I know it's a big controversy on Twitter, and I was on early Twitter this morning and I saw a bunch of stuff right happening. For example, um, they're saying Christ is God. Muslims don't worship God, or sorry, they don't worship Jesus, therefore they don't worship God, right? So I feel like there's a lot of misconception with Vatican II's teaching right there, and people thinking that they know how to interpret correctly Vatican II, which they really don't, right? So, what would be your take on that in particular? I'll give my comments afterward, but
right.
you're the guest
So
right now, and I want to have, yeah.
we must first start off by what we mean and signify by God. Let me ask you a question, obviously. What would you understand God to mean?
Ooh, that's a lot. That's a lot to unpackage.
Would
God,
you, let's just keep it simple. Would you not understand God in its simplest sense that everybody takes it to mean the supreme infinite
A supreme
being.
reality. It's a, supreme
Right.
being, infinite being.
No
Yep.
matter no matter which profession of monotheism you are, in some sense we all share in common this notion of the supreme reality who is infinite and above all creatures,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And flowing from this idea of an infinite supreme being, we also understand it to be of perfections that are also of infinite degree, in a sense, all
Yep.
contained in him in a certain simplicity, um, in a manner which is completely distinct from creatures, eternal, non composite, immutable, etc., and so forth.
Yep. That is
Now,
true.
this is not something that is unique to Christianity, nor is it a matter of an article of faith. This is something that a person can comprehend apart from divine revelation. Matter of fact, I would even argue that one could even come to divine revelation without first knowing God, right?
That is true. That
Since
is true. Yep.
if we do not first have the concept or notion of God, that he exists and that he is, how can we accept the divine revelation from him as
That's
a
true.
being who is supreme? So even prior to the acceptance of divine revelation, one in some sense has to first come to the notion of the supreme being to even accept the revelation of a supreme being. Otherwise, how can we say this is the supreme being?
That is facts. I ain't gonna lie. Yo, what's up, Big Steve? How are you, bro?
So this is where
Nice to
we
see
then come to the
you.
understanding or concept of natural theology, which is that
Yeah. Yeah.
from the existent creatures in this world, from nature itself, that which has finite perfections and it's observable to the senses, we can then reason that there's also an infinite being, right? There's been many arguments of what you call empirical or a posteriori by St. Thomas, his quia vitae, his five ways, right? And those
And
Duns Scotus,
yeah,
the and so on, right? The lawless, whatever. You got your own
so
arguments that you
true.
probably
So true.
studied, right? By efficient
Yeah.
causality, by motion, and so on.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
we must all admit, in some sense, prior to the reception of Christian revelation, that there are individuals who actually understand the notion of the infinite being. And this notion isn't
Yep.
false. This notion is true because by God, we simply signify nothing else than that supreme infinite being.
Correct. That is true. That is very true. I just want to mention something real quick. Pretty much, we had this argument that's being posited by this particular YouTuber, which is going to come out soon. I was in contact with him, and he's going to come out soon talking about this argument on his YouTube channel. I don't want to throw shade at him or anything like that, but you guys will know if you watch his content. You know what I mean? And honestly speaking, I want to tackle this argument before it gets out there because I feel like it's going to do um, a lot of damage to people that don't adhere to this particular belief, right? I know the guy means well, no shame to him. He's a good guy. But we want to tackle this argument now and you know, have it now. So let's go through it right now. It's going to be a Christological argument, obviously, against the incarnation of the divine simplest, the person who adheres to divine simplicity, and the one who adheres to classical theism, right? So the objection is simply this, right? So I'll ask you this, Jenga, since I know you love Christology and you have a whole Discord server on it. So props to you on that. If you guys want to join, let me know. I can talk to Jenga for you or whatever. But so premise one, right? Here's the objection. Every property is either one internal or external. Would you agree to this premise?
Sure.
Okay. Premise two: the human properties of Christ are not external. For I think this person who made this objection is basically suggesting premise two: if they're external, then it will be Nestorianism, which obviously we deny. So, would you agree with premise two that Christ's properties are not external?
Correct. We believe in obviously the communicatio idiomata, which are basically the communication of properties,
Yep.
in which by virtue of Christ or the Son subsisting in both natures, the properties of each and nature are communicated to his person. So
Yep.
yes, would
Yep.
agree with that.
Okay. Conclusion one. Conclusion one. Therefore, the human properties of Christ are internal. You agree with the conclusion?
Correct.
Okay. Premise 3. If Christ gains internal properties, he changes.
Right.
Okay. Premise 4. Christ gains internal properties in the incarnation. Conclusion 2. Therefore, Christ changes. So I think this argument that he's trying to do, he's trying to reconcile, right? Um, he's trying to reconcile neoclassical theism, right, with the incarnation, basically advocating that it is no problem, um, you know, that literally he's changing, that God is changing, and there's absolutely no problem with this. Basically, is what he's trying
Right.
to say.
So his mistake is conflating person in its two aspects. For example, I'll ask you a question.
Hmm.
We would say that there is a man called Peter, and that Peter's an actual person, correct?
Yes, correct.
Right? And now we know by this name Peter, that man which is constituted by his own nature and his own properties. For example, we would understand that Peter's a man and that Paul is a man, but that Peter and Paul are distinct. Why? Because of their own unique properties, like for example, their their skin quality, the shape of their nose, etc., and so forth, right?
Yep, yep,
And
true.
that these qualities make that such a person unique. Now, let's speak of also, let's say Peter gains new properties or some type of new accident. Let's say that he gains an accident of sickness. Does this person change by what is constituted as Peter, or does he still remain Peter even though his person changed by accident?
He's still Peter.
He's still Peter. He's still constituted as Peter. So, by this analogy, we may come to a full understanding of why Christ is said not to change in incarnation. The person of Christ, or that is the Son prior to the incarnation, is constituted by his eternal and immutable generation or begetting from the Father. He is constituted so by the Father. And this constitution is immutable. No matter what happens, Christ remains in his own immutable person constituted by begetting alone, and that by which he is begotten. Now, that's the first aspect in which we may consider person. And this is in reference to his own divinity, right? The immanent life or ad intra life of the Trinity, and which is immutable and completely unchangeable, by which the Son is constituted. Now, we may also consider in the second aspect, in which the theologians consider person to refer to the whole, right? Or that which is the subject of all that is predicated of. And I'll give an example. When we speak of Peter, we can also not only speak of his constitution, of his person, but we can also speak of his person insofar as he is predicative of the entire whole. For example, when I say uh, the soul of Peter, that is included in Peter's definition. When I speak of the hand of Peter, or the legs of Peter, or Peter's existence, all of that is included in the single predication of Peter, because Peter is not only that which is incommunicable and constituted in its own concrete personality, but also contains all that underlies himself, which is existence, nature, accidents, and so on. So we also may speak of Christ in this way. Before the incarnation, the second person underlied all of the divinity, and being incomposite, that is absolutely simple, all things that may be predicated of the divinity was predicated to of the Son. And so we see in the scriptures that the Son is called the wisdom of God and also the power of God, right?
Yep, yep, that's
But
true.
after the incarnation, after the union, which it really occurred and was a created union, we may now speak of this union in relation to the person as to the whole, because the Son truly made this human nature his own in such a manner that all the predications of that human nature may then be said of the Son, not in a manner in which it then constitutes the Son, that is his person, which is immutable and can never change, but only in that manner in which we may say that because the Son subsists through it, all the properties of human nature are then communicated to the Son as an individual, as to the whole, as that which underlies. And in this sense alone, we may say the Son changed. But even in this case in which we speak of the Son changing, this is not a change in anything pertaining to the divine, but only insofar as changing as to the part of the man, since the man now is included in the subsistence of the Logos. In a similar manner, for example, when we participate by grace or we participate in the existence of God, we don't say that God, by having this creature participating in him, changes, but this change is only on the part of the creature who participates, because God has no relation with creation. So even though these properties are communicated to the divinity, there is still no change on the part of God or the Logos considered as God, only on the part of the Logos considered as man. Hence, when we say that the Logos or the Word suffered, this is only insofar as relating to the human nature communicated to the subsistence of the Son, or as
Yeah,
considered underlying the whole.
yeah, that is true. That is true. That's a good point. That's the whole point that the natures retain their properties. That's the whole point of the incarnation. That's the whole point of the real distinction with the two natures subsisting in the person. It's like, listen, well, they still retain their properties, right? That's what it means to have these natures, right? So you're right on that. But we do have a question though. We have someone in the question saying, someone in the chat saying, could you explain the act and terminus of the assumption in relation, um, the one operation of the Trinity? That's his question. So
Right,
you
it's
want to
rather
just, yeah.
simple. There's one operation in God, the Trinity. By this one act of the Trinity, right, there is both an ad intra eternal act, since God is pure act, he is always acting by one simple act of the Trinity. And then this single act, which desires or wills the union or assumption of the human nature, then happens or occurs in time, in which this human nature is then immediately, without any separation from the Word, immediately is united to the terminus or completion of the person of the Word. So the one act or operation is completed by the Trinity, but by the assumption, this termination only occurs in one single person, which is the Word alone. So that's how we understand it.
I just want to clearly clarify something real quick for everyone in the chat. When he says the word ad intra, which is a Latin terminology, especially the scholastics in philosophy, when we use ad intra, that just means something internal to the subject, internal to the agent, right? So, for example, when we say that there's two eminent processions in God happening ad intra, or all these things are ad intra, it just means internal to the agent, meaning internal to the life of God.
Right.
So that's all he
So
means by
when we
it. Mhm.
speak of these acts of God, for example, the assumption, this is something ad extra, which means it's transient, it's outside of the agent, or it's outside of God, right? Just as, for example, when God is said to act and send his spirit and justify us, this is something that is ad extra, it's extrinsic, it's something passing from God to creation.
Exactly. So ad extra, remember guys, external to the agent, ad intra, internal to the agent. So yeah,
So
so
then we
that's a
go
very
back to the analytical critique. We may then qualify that Christ is said to change only insofar as we consider the union of the human nature, not as insofar as we consider on the part of the divine. It's that
exactly.
simple.
Exactly. That is true. Very good. Now I want to say something. I want to comment on a particular aspect that this morning, for example, my Twitter page. If you guys haven't followed me on Twitter, go ahead and do that, bro. I'm not gonna lie, be posting a lot of stuff on there. But um I was responding to something Dr. Khalil and Danny said, which is very interesting. Basically, out of my Twitter, I was reading and saying, yeah, people who critique Vatican II saying we don't worship the same God as Muslims and Jews, going back to that topic since it's trending right now, are ignorant, and the same critique would apply to every Christian who disagrees with a particular aspect of God, insofar as, like, for example, the Thomist, for example, we can take, would say that there's virtual distinctions in God, right? Now, this is obviously different for different schools of thought, like the Scotistic school, right? So now, because we believe in virtual distinctions and formal distinctions, I mean, we totally worship a different God now because there's different aspects. Um, Following that logic, we would have to say that within Christianity itself, Christians worship different gods now too. It's not the same God. So I think that's a consistent argument to say too. Um, would you agree with that, Jenga?
No, I actually had this discussion recently with one particular Twitter individual. His name is Jonathan Hill,
Okay, yeah.
and I had asked him, well, if you believe because Muslims and Jews have slightly distinctive notions of God, because they obviously deny the trihypostatic reality of the divinity, would you then say that therefore because Catholics and Orthodox, because they disagree on the point of the properties of God relating to the processions, whether i.e. the Father and Son proceed the Spirit or proceeds from Father alone, do we then have a different God? Because we
Mm,
disagree on the
mhm.
notions of certain properties of God or God's reality. He simply straight up said, yeah. I was
He
like,
says,
wow.
yeah.
Yeah, he said, yeah. He basically said that Catholics and Orthodox worship a different God because they disagree on the filioque.
Oh my goodness.
That was actually very surprising to me, and it shows the absurdity. It shows actually the absurdity of those who are actually consistent with this position.
Yeah, of course.
And
That
this
is funny.
goes
I'm not
back
gonna.
to how we understand the name God simply, right? If
Yep,
we
yep.
understand the name God simply to refer to that supreme infinite being, then even if one were to deny the Trinity, he would simply have he would have the notion of God and he would keep it, but he would simply be, in a sense, ignorant or fall short in the full understanding of how God is in Himself. But that wouldn't mean he denies God, because he still accepts the notion of God's the supreme infinite being. He will simply deny an aspect, which has been revealed to us by Him. Because we must understand that the Trinity is not something you can find in nature. It has been revealed through the Son. It has been revealed through God, through the prophets of old. This is why God sent us as prophets. This is why
Well,
God even spoke through His angels in the burning bush. Is to communicate
yep.
a real reality of Himself that is higher above human reasoning.
Well, that's
Right?
the point of the incarnation, that the Son reveals more about the inner life of God, right? Because he is the Word of God. He reveals more of who God is, what God is, and stuff like that. So, yeah, the Trinity would only make sense. It makes sense regardless, but it's revealed through the Son, through the revelation, like you
Exactly.
said. Yeah. Mhm.
And so, because of this, those who are ignorant or even to the point of denial, because they don't accept this revelation, cannot be found to be at fault or even to be denying God. It doesn't make sense. And even in the case of those Christians who have a different understanding of the Trinity but still hold to an infinite supreme being, they cannot be said to deny God either. They simply fall short, although not as far as the Muslims and Jews, in the full, complete understanding of how God revealed Himself.
Yep, that's a good point. Now we do have another question in the chat. Basically, he said, "In what way can we say that Christ, who was walking on earth, was divine, if the divine essence wasn't located in him? Would it be just that his body is metaphysically united to him?" Might be a dumb. No, it's not a dumb question. Don't worry about that. Every question is a valid question. So, but yeah, I'll go ahead and give my response. But I want Jenga to go ahead first since he is my guest, and then I'll give my response. Go ahead.
Right. When we speak of Christ as divine, we speak it only in the sense of that the fathers have, that Christ signifies the Word, Christ signifies the person. And because Christ signifies the person, and the person is nothing else than the divine Word, Christ is then said to be divine. And that's the sole sense. We do not speak of Christ as divine insofar as he has a divine body, or that his divinity converted into a divine body. Or when we speak of Christ walking or eating, we do not say that this is some type of divine eating or some type of divine walking, as if God actually has, in his own nature, um, divine legs or some type of spiritual legs, etc., and so forth, as some have
Yeah.
imagined. We only mean in this sense that the person who is considered, i.e., Christ, is the same as the divine Word, who is God Himself, and in a human body with a rational soul, He walked among men, He conversed among men, and He ate among men. And so we may in some sense say that the person ate and slept and walked is God Himself, and that's the sole sense we mean.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I mean, I agree 100% with that response. And again, we must remember that the divinity is not in a location, speaking like that. So yeah, he wouldn't be, or the divinity is not literally physically on a or in a location. But then again, other things we can use
Right.
analogies like
We
that.
must
So
consider the union solely as metaphysical.
exactly.
It's not some type of union by location. If this was the case, then you may even posit Nestorianism. That's actually
Yep.
very close to what Saint Cyril accused Nestorius of, a mere union by conjunction, in which two things are placed side by side, or a mere accidental union, right? We do not speak of this matter. We speak of it
Hmm.
solely as a metaphysical union, in
Yep.
which the union occurs in the divine person of the Son, who is simultaneously omnipresent in a general way, but he's also present in a unique way by person in the human nature.
Yeah, that is very true. So yeah, that's how we can speak about it. The one person, and that's how we can talk about this language. Like, yeah, God, quote unquote, ate, God slept, God died. Even though it would be improperly speaking about the divine nature, obviously, as Jenga just went through. So, but again, it is the one person who is God that did all these things through the nature. So we don't separate the natures, but there is a distinguishment. So yeah, hopefully that kind of answered the question. Um, I think we sufficiently answered that pretty well. Um, ¿De qué más quieres hablar, bro? Tenemos un montón de temas que queremos hablar, pero no sé de qué. I don't know. I don't know if the Spanish audience is here listening to that, but I have recently. I'll tell you guys a little bit about my plans right now. So recently, I have been working with some Spanish people a lot, and we've been doing some good work and all that. So I don't know if they're listening to me right now. I know someone were in the chat earlier, but um,
Que en un proyecto.
en un proyecto andamos trabajando en directos y también trabajando en traducir unas obras tomistas de la escolástica al inglés.
Qué bueno. ¿En qué sujeto o
En
asunto?
sujeto, filosofía de metafísica tomista. También, y también ando trabajando con un par de lulistas que queremos traducir un poco de las obras de Ramón Lull al inglés, obviamente, y un poco al español, porque sus obras están más en catalán y en
You're
latín,
in love
obviamente.
with Ramon Lul, bro. you
Yeah,
might
I
make
know.
him. You might as well just make him your own personal. So you might as well just get a bunch of icons of him.
Yeah, I'm gonna get icons hopefully, inshallah, But I will say this though,
Do you
for all
even
the
actually
audio,
read? Do you actually read Ramon Lul directly?
I read him through the translated Spanish sources because Spain obviously has a bunch of translated works of him, sorry. And the slew lists of Spain obviously write in Spanish. So yeah, I would read in Spanish. I rarely read it in English, to be honest with you. But
Okay. What have you read from him personally?
well, tenemos un poco de las obras de él, como por ejemplo el libro de Félix, que literalmente creo que es un libro muy bueno para principiantes. So if you're a beginner, I'd suggest that book. It's number one for that book.
Consignando que metafísicos.
No, anda enseñando principalmente la introducción, un poco de todo. Introduce la historia y también un poco del arte de su Ars Magna.
Ah,
Let's see what he says. We have another question. What do you think is the difference between Saint Cyril and Severus? That's a good question, actually. Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
so I believe, and I truly profess this, that this is a sole difference between Saint Cyril and those who are the stricter Miaphysites, is that, and I'll first start with what I believe the Monophysites believe, right? So we would believe that there's different categories of monophysis, and monophysis can be understood in some sense like a genus or like a umbrella term. And obviously, we understand the monophysitism of the Arians, who believed, according to many of the fathers, such as St. Ambrose in his De Incarnatione Sacramento Christo, um, that they believe that the human nature actually converted into the divinity, where there was like a changing of flesh and blood into the spiritual life, right? Which is also known as Eutychianism, strictly. Then you also have those who held that the divinity actually became lesser, based on the scripture Philippians 2:7-8, where it says that that the Son, being found in the form of God, emptied himself into the human nature. So that's also another form of monophysitism, because they believe single union occurred. Then you have Apollinarianism, in which he actually believed that that the logos, being the rational principle of the human body, was the sole rational principle, and hence there was no rational soul in the Son, and which he then was composed of metaphysis, one nature. And this seems to be the first time one nature is actually mentioned, at least by the Alexandrian tradition, um,
Yeah.
in which one nature is spoken of. It's by Apollinarius. Then you have, I would argue, the monophysitism of not only Severus but Dioscorus and their party, and possibly even some who were friends of Cyril. Some even suppose Acacius and Melitene, or even a blessed Theodosius of Ancyra, but I would actually argue otherwise. Regardless, what's their view? I would say their view, in the simplest sense, is that they profess that the two natures, right, that is two essences. And when we speak of essence, we understand it in the individual sense. That is, that there is a singular, concrete nature that is not something that's general or abstract, like when we speak of humanity or like multiple humans, but that there's a single human nature with its own properties composed of body and soul that united with divinity in such a way that we may speak of the essence or the quiddity or the whatness of the human nature that is a rational animal to then be combined and become one with the oneness of the divinity. So when we speak of what Christ is, we can't say that he's two what's, a God and a rational animal, but he's just the an irrational animal who's God, or a
Yeah.
combination of both, to where it may be predicated of one species. So they understand that there's one nature or one substance, as we speak of in Latin terminology, that holds multiple properties from divinity and humanity. So that when we speak of Christ dying, we're not speaking of solely his person dying, but we're speaking of this nature dying. So we cannot understand not only not a division of the natures, but also not even a distinction of the natures, but it's the one nature that died. It is the one nature that created all things. It is the one nature that was created. All things are predicated of this single nature, and hence falling from the single nature, there's also one mode of operation. So when we say God created, we must also understand this to mean that the human nature created, because it's the same nature as the divinity. The one nature created, the one nature was created, the one nature creates, the one nature eats, the one nature sleeps, and so on and so forth. And so this is what they understand by the term metaphysis, and they abuse from St. Cyril this terminology. So you may understand just how we profess the communicatio idiomatum from two natures to one person. They profess also communicatio idiomatum from the two properties of each nature to one nature. So that would be the difference, between our view and their view. Now, Saint Cyril, when we understand him to speak of metaphysis, we understand it in the sense in light of his Ephesine Creed, or Letter 39 to John of Antioch, or Latin Coeli in Latin, in which he teaches that not only is there a difference of natures after the union, which is also seen in his first letter to Nestorius, and that the Son, suffered in his own nature. Remember, Saint Cyril in many works speaks after the union that the Son does not suffer in his own nature, but suffers in the nature of the flesh, right, or sarkos. But he also speaks of the two natures uniting in one person, right? F enos, or F, yeah, F enos prosopo. That is, uh, the from the one person. And so when he understands metaphysics, he means it in no other sense in which he did with the form of reunion and with John of Antioch and the Antiochians, as we see in his 44th letter to Eulogius and his 40th letter to Acacius. That he understands the union of the two natures to form one Son, one Lord, and one Christ, and that those at Antioch profess nothing else but this. And that's found in his 44th letter to Eulogius. But in the form of reunion, 433, there's no mention of one nature at the union. The only mention is that the two natures unite to form one person or constitute one person. So we must understand that when St. Cyril speaks of Miaphysis, this is interchangeable with one person. And this would make sense since St. Cyril in his terminology with Nestorius is utilizing Nestorius' terminology. Since Nestorius believed very clearly that when we signify nature, we not only signify nature, but also an individual, that is a person. He understood by Christ's human nature to refer to Jesus Christ. And this is why he would say only Jesus Christ was born of Mary, because he believed only the human nature was born of Mary. But he conflated subsistence with nature. And so St. Cyril uses terms. Give me 1 second. Somebody's calling me.
Yeah, no problem. Take your time. So I think that pretty much solves the question and answers it. But yeah, now I want to move forward real quick while he gets back. I want to push this idea right here. I want to be the first YouTube channel pretty much exposing and moving forward to the teachings of the Lulian schools. So if you guys do have any questions right now, type them in the chat. We're going to be heading into that direction. I'm excited to show y'all what I know and, obviously benefit the body of Christ with this knowledge that we have, because I feel like the Lulian school is definitely something that everyone should learn and consider. You know what I mean? Especially that I think the most famous form of like intellectual studies that the Catholics have is mostly Thomism. So I'm excited to push forward my school of thought personally. Um, you know, um, so if you guys do have any questions on that, go ahead and type them in the chat. I will answer all that too. Any other Christological questions, Trinity questions, theological? Make sure they're theological and philosophical uh, based, more pretty much. But yeah, if you guys, oh, there's also another thing I wanted to touch
I'm back.
upon, but I will. Oh, you're back. Okay, okay. I want to ask you about this, right? So I obviously me and you talked about this before, but for the stream, for the people watching this, I want it to benefit all the believers. Okay, so me and you have talked about this in private, obviously, but I would like to talk about it now on stream so people can know what's up. So
Okay.
I'm gonna ask you this: when Saint Cyril, I think this question is gonna be very very central to a lot of people's reading of Saint Cyril. When Saint Cyril says that Christ has only one nature, is the Coptic Orthodox Church correct in their interpretation of Saint Cyril, or what does Saint Cyril mean by one nature in Christ? Why does he say that? Why is that? And how do we reconcile this with Chalcedonian uh, language?
Right. So, as I explained earlier, the Miaphysis term is not the usual manner of St. Cyril speaking. St. Cyril actually uses the term hypostases, physis, and ousia in the more traditional sense of St. Basil and the Greek fathers, where hypostases means the particular of a universal or the ousia, and so hypostases is predicated to the particular. Just as, for example, when we speak of the universal human nature, and then there's that particular man, right? We might also speak of that particular Peter or that particular Paul, etc., right? As we see in letter 38 of St. Basil. So St. Cyril uses the same terminology before the Nestorian controversy in his Thesaurus on the Trinity. And this is proven from Petavius in his work on the Incarnation of the Word, where he goes over a bunch of these citations from St. Cyril's Thesaurus on his different use of hypostases, physis, and ousia. Now, we then get into Nestorian controversy, and we observe that Nestorius, he uses hypostases and physis in a different sense to not only refer to the properties or natural properties of a thing, but also to refer to its individuality or what we call the subsistence of a thing, and that by which underlies the whole thing. Now, because of this, Nestorius taught that there was two natures divided in the one Christ, even though he obviously denied this, as we see in the words of St. Cyril. But he believed that the union among these two natures only occurred by grace or by accident, right? That they're only united by conjunction, that is, side by side, not a true union, by authority or dignity. So, because he believed that the dignity of the divine word and the divine nature was communicated to the person of the second Son, or Christ, in his human nature, he believed that the dignity made this human person subject to the same dignity as the human divine nature, so that we may speak of it as God, we may speak of it as worthy of honor, and we may even worship it with the divine word, which was condemned in the anathemas. So, because of this use of the language in the stories used, that is, there's one person with his own natural properties, not just person considered in itself, but also with natural properties. Saint Cyril also uses terminology, and he combated Nestorius, and using his same terminology, in which he then utilized the Miaphysis term, one nature, which he understood nothing else but to refer to one individual with his own natural properties. Now, we must understand that because this Saint Cyril didn't mean that there is only one natural properties of the divinity alone or natural properties of the humanity alone. He in fact combats this many times because many people accuse him of Apollinarianism, that the natures had mixed. He teaches in many places, especially in his 39th letter and his letter 46, which is the second letter to Census, that the natures did not mix and they remain in their own existences after the union, and that the difference among the natures exists in natural quality. And obviously, this is the same case in Ephesus, where he says, after the union, the differences of the natures remain. But we see here that St. Cyril speaks of nature in two different senses. He wants to say that after the union, there's one nature, but that the difference of the natures remain, which may seem prima facie contradictory. This is because we also understand that St. Cyril equivocates upon his definition of nature. He speaks of nature in one sense as pertaining to an individual whole, right? Just as he uses the example of body and soul. Before man is composed, he is both soul alone and body alone, only a mental thought. That is because the soul and body don't exist and they're not divided in reality. But then after the union of soul and body, they're no longer considered separated or divided, but they complete one individual nature of the man. So not only is there one nature of the man, but there's also one individual, one person. So too, he uses from this example that just as divinity is separated from the humanity only in thought, because they're not really separate in reality, after the union, they form for us one Son, one Lord, and one Christ. And that's his own words. He uses from the body and soul analogy, that where it completes one man, to say there's therefore one Son, one Christ, one Lord. So we understand by this the person of Christ. And so when he speaks also of Miaphysis, we understand that he's speaking of the individual or the person of the Son. But when he speaks elsewhere of the difference of natures, or says that the Son after the union does not suffer in his own nature, he's speaking here only of the natural properties of the natures, not considered as individuals.
Very good response. Very good response. So, yeah, I know we talked about this before, and I think your exposition was pretty well. So, hopefully, they benefited from that too, because I know that's a big question that, for example, some Coptic Orthodox people like to use against the Chalcedonians, right? Um, Especialmente contra nosotros y los ortodoxos de Eastern Orthodox, literalmente usan este
Sí,
argumento
o los
donde
ortodoxos orientales.
yeah, exactly, los ortodoxos orientales. Así que it's kind of like a bit of a stretch when they say that.
Right. I mean, that's their own critique. That's the arguments that their own fathers have provided, specifically
Yeah,
amongst Severus in the 6th century, who was their main and greatest theologian. And
yeah, yeah.
they held debates with Emperor Justinian, right, and so
Yep.
on, and John the Grand or John of Caesarea. They're just observing the debates that occurred among them. But we must also recognize, right, that Miaphysis wasn't found only in the works of Saint Cyril. It also managed to get its way into the Council of Chalcedon. Yes, the Council of Chalcedon recognizes that Saint Cyril used the term Miaphysis. Is actually brought up in discussion in the first session because Dioscorus tried to justify his own heresy of Eutychianism by saying, "Oh, Saint Cyril used the term Miaphysis." So we actually see in the first session in the Acts of the Council of Chalcedon that they actually discuss in what sense must we understand Saint Cyril's term of Miaphysis. And uh,
Yeah. Mhm.
Aetius, right? I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce his name. Aetius, the priest. He actually discusses and says we must understand this in no way. We must understand this term to negate division, but not to negate that there's a union of two natures and that the difference remains.
Yeah, I feel you. We have the chat is going crazy. Zan, what's up, bro? God bless you. Glad to see you here. He says, Jenga, my student, good to see you here. Um,
Good to see you as well, my friend.
we got I'm so sorry if I pronounce this wrong. Gadi. I'm sorry with a Spanish accent. Gadi. I don't know. But what's up, bro? We're still back. Glad to see you back, bro. I know you had. I think it was you. I'm pretty sure you were one of the people on my YouTube channel that had questions about Christology. So if you do, go ahead, put them all in the chat. We're gonna answer everything. So go ahead, bro. If you have questions about the Coptic Orthodox Church, go ahead, Romanos. It's fine. And then we have Malachi again saying, "What do you think of neoclassical theism? What do you think of
Neo-Chalcedonianism.
neo-Chalcedonianism?" Yeah. And then before you answer that, I want to shout out my boy Dewong. He's in the chat. Dewong, God bless you, brother. All right, go ahead, bro. Go ahead.
So I think I only achieve and believe in Neo-Chalcedonianism. I believe it's a term used by monophysites and those historians who believe that there was an actual deviation in Christology from the first Council of Chalcedon to um, the Council of 553 and Second Constantinople. I don't believe that's the case. I don't believe that the first Council of Chalcedon actually would deny any of the theology of the newer Chalcedonians in 553 and after, like St. Maximus or St. John Damascene. We see in many places, for example, the Christology of Chalcedon is just based on Leo. So we see Pope St. Leo in his letters to the bishops of Illyria, because one of the main critics of the Tome of Leo at the Council of Chalcedon were the Illyrian Egyptian bishops. They had a very hard time trying to reconcile the Tome of Leo with the works of Saint Cyril and apparently his anathemas and the Council of Ephesus in general, blah blah blah. But we see in the Council of Ephesus that the Tome of Leo is actually defended, but not only at the Council of Ephesus by Asius and I believe it was a bishop of Delorium. I forgot his name. Um, but not only did they defend it, including Basil of Seleucia, by citing Saint Cyril's works, where he speaks of the difference of natures and that the natures are, and that the properties of each nature are predicated differently in division from one another. Look at letter 39 of John at Antioch if you guys are curious about what I'm saying. Um, but he also Pope Leo speaks for himself, and I believe you can find it in letter 145. If it's not letter 145, just search up on Google or New Advent. Um, Pope Leo's letter to the Illyrians, Illyrians, and you'll see that Pope St. Leo gives a defense of the tome, because the tome specifically, they had a problem where it says that each nature works properly to itself, right? The word works in accordance to the word, and the flesh works in accordance to the flesh. St. Pope Leo basically defends himself and says that you misunderstand me to refer to two different subjects, and that this is an inseparable operation, right? It's not a separable operation. The operation is inseparable, and that there's one operator who is the person of the Son, right? He says one operator, the person of the Son. That's
Yes,
that's
sir.
that's Neo-Chalcedonian language, right?
Mhm.
So it's not that we understand that the human nature and the divine nature become their own operators, but they have their own activities which flow from their divine properties and their human properties from one operator or one person who acts through them, so that
Yep.
unity is maintained, right? And so this flows really tightly with the notion of the theandric activity or energy of Christ. Because they're inseparable, we may then understand that the divine activity works through the human activity, just as in the case of the Passion on the cross, where not only do we say that just a man died, but that God died. And this death was not just a regular death where the body and soul was disunited, but it was such a manner of death that the divinity worked through it so that Christ could merit infinite grace. So the death on the cross wasn't just an act of finitude, but it was an infinite act. It was a finite act united with an infinite act, and by which the Son could merit infinite grace from the Father through his passion. And we also see other cases, such as when Christ walks on water. This is not just a human act, this is a divine act. It's by one theandric energy or inseparable activities of the operations of each nature. And you can find that all in Pope St. Leo's letter to the Illyrians. where it's clearly taught that he did not divide the subjects, nor did he have a different Christology from those later on. But he taught exactly what St. John Damascene taught, St. Maximus taught, um, and all those later on.
Yes, sir. Now I wanna. He said, "I've heard the scholastics rejected, especially. I don't even know how to say that name. I'm not gonna embarrass myself, honestly. um, in hypostasis, I think. I think it's it. Yeah. ¿Qué iba a decir? Oh yeah, Hulus. God bless you, brother. Good to see you here. Now Zan has a question. We'll answer it in a minute. Again, I see your question. But Zan said he's asking this: did the divine essence incarnate address this question? For the hypostasis is the divine essence. So I'll go first on this one, and then I'll hear your thoughts, Jenga. So me
Okay.
and Jenga have different distinctions in God. Okay, so I, as you guys know, I adhere to the Lulian tradition, leaning more scotistic. So I would say that there's still a distinction between person and essence. I've posited a formal distinction, which is a sort of a real distinction, right? So, and again, it's still different than a properly called real distinction, right? So you have to get into the terminology of how Scotus and the Lulists use this terminology here, but um, it's a real distinction. It's prior to the work of the intellect here. So there is a distinction here. However, there's no real lack of identity between the two terms, right? So again, different scholastic authors will defend this, such as Mastro. But other than that, we would say, yeah, there's still a distinction between person and essence. So technically speaking, it would be improper to collapse them together and say that there's only a distinction in the mind, right? Which the Thomists don't only say that there's a distinction in the mind solemnly, like there's a foundation in reality. That's what a virtual distinction is. But we would say, yeah, it would be improper to say that the divine essence incarnates technically. The person incarnates, not the essence. Then the three persons would encompass the incarnation. Yet that's not true. But go ahead, Jenga, you can answer that now.
Um, there is in some sense in which we may speak of the divine nature incarnate, and that's solely in the sense that Saint John Damascene means. Um, in his work in the Summa Theological, I haven't read too much on it, but Saint Thomas does answer this question in his Summa Theologica, particularly his Tertia Pars, question 2, the mode of the union of the Word incarnate. Um, I could possibly bring it up right now.
Yeah, go ahead. It's fine. And by the way, yeah, I agree with everything he's saying. I was just taking the question to be literally that the essence incarnates. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, I get what
If
you're
we're
saying.
speaking of natural union, insofar as we're speaking that the union did not take place in suppositum or individual, but among the natures itself, then that would be wrong. We do not speak of the union in that sense. We would not say that in the same manner that the body and soul united, we may speak of divinity and humanity, or in that sense, a strict natural union. But we may say that the divine nature did incarnate, and only in this sense, because it incarnated personally, right? Because the divine person of the Son is virtually, as obviously Aquino said prior, that the divine person is considered virtually distinct from the divine essence. It would be simply because the the Son, by means of the union and the perichoresis of the divine nature is said to indwell the human nature because of the
Yeah.
perichoresis or the inseparability of the person from essence. And
Yes,
so
sir.
Thomas
Yes, sir.
answers in reply to objection 3, as St.
Mm.
John Damascene says, De Orthodox Fide, chapter 3, section 6. The divine nature is said to be incarnate because it is united to the flesh personally, and not that it is changed into flesh. So likewise, the flesh is said to be deified, as he also says in chapter 15, not by change, but by the union with the Word. Its natural property still remaining, and hence it may be considered as deified, inasmuch as it becomes the flesh of the Word of God, but not that it becomes God. And so, in some sense, we may say then that the divine nature was infleshed, because the person was in flesh and is inseparably united from the divine nature, but not that the termination of the union occurred in the divine nature, but only the divine person. So, because of the unity of divine person and divinity, we may, in the soul sense, speak of the divine essence being in flesh. But even this must be understood qualified.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah. Moving on to this. Zan says, "Hey, glad to see you back. My boy just realized, yes, sir, I'm back. Better than ever. God is good, bro." Let's see. So we got Gaddy here saying thoughts on Cassian Tato. I don't know who that is. I'm not gonna lie. Maybe Jenga does.
I don't know either.
Oh, okay. Well, Gaddy, I'm sorry, bro. We're not gonna be able to answer that question. Um, yes is saying, how do Miaphysites cope with how the fact that the pre-Ephesians Latins have Pope Leo's Christology?
Um, they essentially. I mean, this is one way you can just read or watch Agin's videos, or maybe, yeah. I mean, he teaches from the Latin
Is
Father.
is his name
Um,
pronounced Agin or is it Agin? I don't even
Agin, the same thing. But
know.
essentially,
I
they
don't know.
would utilize some Apollinaire forgeries from the work of Pope Julius, which teach metaphysics. They would also use other forgeries from Pope Felix and so on. But besides these few forgeries, which are clearly recognized by um, historians to be forgeries, especially the the Julian forgeries, they would simply try to argue that in every which way, when the Latin Fathers speak of two substances or two natures, they're speaking only in this matter of entheoria. That's how I've seen some go about it. It's not really the wise way because the Latin Fathers don't utilize the same terminology as Saint Cyril of entheoria or in mental contemplation, or that is understood through the nous, that this duality occurs. Especially among Saint Ambrose. Saint Ambrose is a tough one from them, since Saint Ambrose is very clear in his diaphysitism, leading and paving the way to Saint Augustine. Same thing with Saint John of Cassian and the likes, Vincent Lorenz, etc. Um, some of them would just simply concede that the Latins were Nestorian-like and that they erred. And if they had attended the Council of Ephesus, they would have repented. But their copes are that's what it is, just very copious. It's mainly a concession, or they try to interpret the lines through another tradition, or they try to utilize forgeries. That's essentially
Yeah.
it. We
Hmm.
can see obviously from the time of Tertullian through Cyprian, Novatius, Marius Victorinus, and so on, that they utilize a certain type of language of two natures, right? Tertullian is very clear on this. Anyone who's read his De Praxis or On the Flesh of Christ, De Carne Christi, they would see this language of two natures, not just before the union, but after the union, very clearly that Christ is in two natures, that both natures are in him, and that he's in both. Saint Ambrose, following this tradition, also utilizes the same terminology. Saint Jerome, you don't see this as clearly, but you do see even Nestorian terminology used by Saint Jerome, which is not foreign to Saint Ambrose, but it's more prevalent Saint Jerome, where Saint Jerome that says that the word assumed a human person, and this may be understood insofar as human person here is understood to be the face or character of a thing, as it was utilized in ancient times, where person that doesn't always mean the individual or subsistence, but it can often refer to the character or the face, right? Kind of how the Sabellians used it. They believe three persons just mean the three faces of one subsistence, or the characters of one subsistence, right? Um,
Yeah.
but Saint Jerome was very clear that if his he speaks of he speaks of the distinction of the word and the flesh. He says that the word did not suffer, but the flesh did. He's very diaphysite in his terminology. Saint Ambrose explicitly speaks of Christ being in two natures, and that he speaks in both natures in his exposition of Orthodox faith, and in his Incarnation. I'm just gonna say in English, in his work on the incarnation of the sacrament or mystery of Christ, he explicitly condemns the Arian teaching that there is one nature. Right? He literally says that the Arians have thrown up a perfidy, saying that Christ is one nature. And then he says that this teaching that Christ is in one nature is a greater blasphemy, um, is a greater blasphemy than those who deny that the Son's not God. He later says that,
Mm-hmm.
um, which is saying something. He didn't before and after teaches that Christ is two natures. He even says in section 77 that Christ has two minds, and that he's dual or twofold. We then see also this culminate in Saint Augustine, primarily since he's one of the greater Latin minds, where in the beginning of his Christology, he doesn't really go upon speaking of two natures or Christ in two natures, but during around 417 to 431 ish, where he's going through the Pelagian controversy, he starts speaking of Christ as a unity of two natures or two substances. He speaks of Christ in two natures in his debate with the Arian Maximus. He speaks specifically because the Arian Maximus had said Christ it can't be God because of John 10:30, or not John 10:30, John 14:28, where the Son says the Father is greater than I, and Saint Augustine basically utilizes this text to say that there's two natures and that Christ is in two natures, and hence in his divinity he is the one with the Father, John 10:30. But in relation to his human nature, he is lesser than the Father is greater than him, etc. and so forth. And then we also see this culminate not just among St. Augustine, but even among Carthage, Gaul, which is France, um, Germania, right, the Germans, and other parts of Africa, right, and also the the Lucerians, or not
Mm-hmm.
Lucerians. It's a certain location. It leaves my mind because these are ancient places, but
Right.
essentially they met up in a council, and this is the Council of Carthage, 427 or 423. But essentially, is the Council of Carthage against Leporius, and Leporius was a specific Pelagian who taught, by virtue of his Pelagianism, that Christ was free, and that he was not only free by nature, but that this natural Christ who was free by nature was given grace by the divine nature, um, to then actually do works that are meritorious, but not because um, of the union of the divinity, but because of the grace given to him from the divine word. So this particular Pelagian was trying to utilize his Pelagianism by teaching Nestorianism, in which Saint Augustine not only refuted his Pelagian heresy, but also refuted his Nestorian heresy, which then led to the Council of Carthage 427, which they signed the libellus against Leporius, which was signed by all the bishops of Gaul, which is France, Carthage, Germania, which is the Germans, etc., and so forth. And in this, they taught that Christ was twofold, a twofold substance, gemine substantiae, or twinfold substance, and that
Mm-hmm.
the union occurred in his person. And this was signed by all the bishops in that general area. So they literally had one of the first councils on Christology, prior to Ephesus, prior to Chalcedon, prior to Toledo 447, prior to any of these councils. This is one of the first Christological councils, which teach that Christ is two substances, literally only 4 years before Ephesus. And this was accepted even by Oriental Orthodox saints such as Saint John of Cassian, right? He explicitly in his work against Eutyches and Nestorius cites this council and its confession, and says that this is what all the Catholics around the world believe, and this is what those people of this region believe. Right? Saint Vincent of Lawrence, slowly after Ephesus, interprets Ephesus to refer to the teaching of two substances, etc., so forth. He believes this is the true faith. Um, we didn't see other Latin fathers in that time. Hilary of Arles also teaching two substances, and this is slightly after Ephesus. And so we continue to see that even after the acceptance of Ephesus, the Latins are understanding the tradition that they have received, that Christ is not only of two natures, but that he is two natures. And some are even going so far to say is he's in two natures, um, and so forth. And then this culminates in Pope St. Leo, the successor of Pope not Pope St. Celestine, but Pope Sixtus the Third, in which there's two natures of Christ. And Pope Leo was a deacon of Pope Sixtus, and Pope Sixtus was around when the Council of Ephesus was finally accepted by John of Antioch and his party, right? So Pope Leo, being a deacon of Sixtus the Third, would have obviously held some of the same Christology as Pope Sixtus, and Sixtus the same as Celestine. So we see that there's a certain Latin tradition that's building up upon two natures even after acceptance of Ephesus, interpreting Ephesus in their own way. And obviously, there's certain diaphysite, there's clear diaphysite teachings in the Council of Ephesus. So this entire Latin tradition is kind of culminating in the West, and the Oriental Orthodox kind of just look over it. They don't really speak
Yeah.
of it. They kind of just say, "Oh, if these fathers were at Ephesus, they would have accepted one nature." Well, first of all, one nature is never spoken of, or Miaphys is never spoken of in the Council of Ephesus. There's no mention of it. The closest thing you have is where they appeal to the third anathema and the third letter to Nestorius, where it says that the union is a natural one, right? It's a natural union. But this, just because it's a natural union doesn't mean that it's a union of two natures among themselves. Saint Cyril is very clear that it's a natural union. Natural union means that it's a true union in the person of Christ. This is why he speaks of the difference of natures remaining. And this is why he had to clarify with John of Antioch in his 39th letter, because a lot of bishops had believed that St. Cyril's third letter was teaching monophysitism, even though he didn't use the term Miaphysis yet. You can see this in the works of Theodorus Cyrus and his Contra Anathemas, because Theodorus Cyrus, who later attended Chalcedon and had accepted Ephesus and the union of the Antiochians in 433, he thought St. Cyril was teaching that there was one nature by the third anathema. And this is also the case with the bishops of Orients against Cyril's anathemas. You can read all these works. I'm quoting all these works. The Bishop of Orient, they were, in their refutation of the 12 anathemas, were saying that the third anathema taught Miaphysis. St. Cyril refutes this. He says that he does not mean to deny the difference of two natures, and he recognizes the difference of two natures after the union. See his response to their critique of the third anathema. But that this was a true union, not a union by dignity or authority, as Nestorius taught, but that there's true union of the natures found in the person, where there's one Son, one Lord, and one Christ. Now, because this is the case, we then see why the Latins in the West, even after Ephesus and having accepted Ephesus and having read Ephesus, because that's what the popes must do after they receive a council, not only is it translated into Latin to correlate with the Greek text, because obviously the papal legates are present to translate the Greek text and then give the Latin to the pontiff, but is also read and accepted by the pontiffs. They read the council themselves. They made sure that all the acts and all the sessions were in accordance with their teaching, especially Pope St. Celestine and Sixtus. They read the acts of the councils because Pope St. Celestine was trying to make sure that his decrees against Nestorius was enforced, specifically the decree that if Nestorius did not repent of his heresy within a certain time limit, he was to be deposed. So they read these councils. The papal legates were there and present at the councils. And yet still we see that this diaphysite interpretation among the West pervades. It persists. It doesn't stop. The Antiochians, who spoke Greek more closely, they hesitated. But after the Council of Chalcedon, after the Council of Ephesus in 431, with the reunion formula of 433, they finally accepted it because Saint Cyril was very clear that he means the union occurs in the one person. Read letter 39. Search up 433, the formula of reunion. It's clear that the union occurs in person, that there is one person, and that the sayings of the divinity and humanity are divided, some to the divinity, some to humanity, but both to the one person. It's clear being a unity of person, and because of this, they accepted it. So the only way they can do is cope and say, "Oh, they were accepted at Ephesus if they were present." No, we still see a Latin tradition saying that there is two natures, even though they read Ephesus. That would have been the same with
Yeah.
St. Augustine, the same with St. Ambrose, and all the other fathers. And same thing with St. John Cassian, who was after the Council of Ephesus and still taught two natures, which is funny.
Yes, sir. Now we do have another question though. We have sorry it took so long to get to your question, brother. But he says, "What are your thoughts on the Assyrian Church of the East theologians like I'm gonna butcher this name, Ba
Bye bye.
Baya
And
Babai?
Theodore.
Yeah, yeah, if they're right, yeah. Could we say that they are Orthodox?
They are certainly Orthodox. Anyone reads the works of Theodore at the Council of Chalcedon or his words, he clearly anathematizes Nestorius. He condemns anyone who speaks of two sons after the union. He even defends Saint Cyril, which is interesting. He quotes directly from his Scholia on the Incarnation of the Word in defense of the Tome of Leo. Theodore is Orthodox. He accepts the statements of Ephesus. He accepts the anathemas. He's very Orthodox. There were certain works of his that were condemned in the later Council of Constantinople too, but it has no concern concerning his own person, his own reinstatement by Pope Saint Leo later on. As for regards to Mar Babai, I have not read his works, but apparently from what other ACOE have told me, they accept the Tome of Leo and all its contents as Orthodox, and that would be sufficient for true Orthodoxy.
Yes, sir. Then we got Zan saying base Jenga. Agan is a scary dude, bro. Then I guess Zan is asking, in what sense would you concede to two Christs?
No sense.
Yeah, I was about to say, I don't think anyone says that. Yeah, that's two Christ is crazy. I don't know. That entails two
We
persons.
may
So
concede in some sense in which we may speak of the Word in Christ. Right? We have some fathers who distinguish the Word or the Logos and Christ, Christos. But they're using Word or Logos here to refer to the divine nature. Like Saint Gregory of Nazianzus, he says that the Word and Christ were distinguished. Saint John Cassian also speaks of the Word and Christ as distinguished. Um, some fathers just use the Word to refer to the divine nature. That's why Pope St. Leo in his letter 28, he says that the Word does what the Word does, and the flesh does what the flesh does. He's just using Word to refer to divine nature there.
yeah, because Zan said he would, but I guess yeah. I mean, maybe he agrees with us. I think he would agree with us, but I don't know. But yeah. Yes, sir. Hold on. Let me see if we have anything. I'm trying to remember if anyone asked me some other Christological questions because I know some people were DMing me about it, but quite can't remember what they were. But let me check my messages real quick to check on these things because I'm pretty sure some did. So give me like a few minutes.
I'll be back as well.
Is it only a Christological question? Well, this live was in particular for like defending the incarnation of the Word. We already covered many topics of the Son of God, but in all honesty, go ahead, shoot me any question you would like. Anything philosophical, theological is good. That's what the whole actual life is really about. So it can be anything philosophical slash theological, brother. So feel free to do that. Um, anything pretty much. Are you Catholic? Or what's up with that? Okay, yeah, yes, I'm Catholic. I have a question on justification. What's up, man? What's your question on justification? I think justification is a very interesting topic, especially since us Catholics have been dealing with the Reformed traditions pretty much for centuries. So it's very based to our fundamental beliefs and stuff like that. So it's always good talking about justification.
All right, I'm back.
Our friend here says he has a question on justification. So I guess we're just waiting for him to type the question real quick. But I was basically expounding upon that in Catholic theology, it's pretty central to our belief system of how we've been, dealing with the Reformation stuff. I guess I'm pretty sure his question is going to be something like that. So I'm just curious what he's going to say. He is Catholic though.
Mhm.
Vamos a ver qué es lo que trae, porque no sé, a lo mejor sea una objeción de la Reformación. Let's see. Zan says, "What relation does Christ have towards his human nature?" I'm not sure I understood that question.
What?
Zan says, "What relation does Christ have towards his human nature?" Do you understand it? I mean,
Yeah,
can't think of
one by
this.
subsistence,
Oh, that's what he means. Okay, okay.
one by one by which the individual is predicated of its properties. Christ simply signifies the individual, so it'll just be person nature relation. If you're speaking of a certain distinction, it'll just be a real distinction.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. It's a real distinction that he has with his human nature. He's not identical to his human nature. Now, yes, says if we say that there is remission of sins and infusion of justice, would that lead to a formal cause? Sorry, would that lead to two formal causes? I've seen the reform try to say this is what it entails.
Um, no, it wouldn't lead to two formal causes because the infusion of justice is by which the remission of sin occurs. It's not one by which the sole remission of sins occurs and then the infusion of justice, as it's by a simultaneous act, but it's by which the reduction or privation of justice, that is the guilt, is then translated into justice. The remission of sins occurs, and that's by one act or one infusion of the divine quality or sanctifying grace.
Yeah, I hope that answered your question.
And
Sans,
by that infusion, just to add, by that infusion, by which the privation of guilt is then converted to the plenitude of justice, um, or by which man is justified, converted from ungodly to godly. That's when also virtually distinguished we speak of the non-imputation of sin.
yes, sir. Zen says like he's complimenting you. I've taught you right. I'm proud.
Right.
Zan, Zan is tu maestro.
Okay. And so,
By the way, for those who don't speak
stream.
Spanish, I basically said Zan is his teacher slash master.
You think we're ready to end the stream?
I mean, if there's no more questions coming in, yes, but let's see. He said muito bom. I don't know where he's. Zan, você fala português? I don't know if he does or not. But
It's very
if
good. Muy bien.
muy bien, muy bien. If you guys have any more questions before we do head out, drop them real quick because I still got a few minutes. But if I mean, I don't know if Jenga has to leave or not. But
No, I'd have to go Fube.
se eu
I'll,
falo português. Sim, ok, ok. Fala um pouco ou muito? Now,
these Portuguese speakers.
I think you messed up, Zan. It's eu falo with the o at the end, but you're close enough. Good, good, good. You're doing good though. See, eu falo português.
Un poco.
Um, eu falo um pouco português. Eu falo mais espanhol um pouco. Yeah, there you go. Portuguese is based. I'm not gonna lie. Um,
Sí,
you already
suena
know.
bien. Es muy suave.
Suena bien. Yo creo que literalmente te voy a decir algo. Yo creo que el idioma de latín que se oye muy masculino en un hombre es español y portugués. El francés se oye muy femenino en un hombre.
Pero sí, yo, yo creo que español es la idioma más próximo del latín.
Yeah. Yeah.
¿Qué tú
True.
crees?
Sí, güey, repítelo.
¿Qué tú crees sobre la suerte de español es más próximo del latín, la
Sí,
idioma?
yo creo que sí. Yeah, yo creo que el más idéntico al latín creo que sería español.
Sí.
Yo creo que sí. He says, yes, has one question. He says, what are your thoughts on the civic and religious worship distinction that the Reform tried to make?
And civic worship pertains to the dignity of office. The saints don't have an office. Some of them are slaves, some of them are peasants, some of them are mere monks and priests, and yet they're still given veneration. Same thing with angels. Angels don't have a civic office. They're not kings. They're not. They don't have any hold of a civil office. They're just angelic creatures, and yet they're still worshipped. Genesis 18:2, Joshua 5:14.
Did he cut out or am I cutting out? Or did you go on mute? I don't even know. Chat, let me know. Let me know, chat. Because I don't know. I don't know if it's me or if it's him. Can y'all hear me? I don't know if you guys can hear me or not. That's crazy, bro. He cut out. Okay, okay. I was about to say I didn't know if he did or didn't. He cut out for sure. Okay, okay. Yeah. I'm assuming you're saying, yeah, fala em português. Okay. Os mai e pai. Your mom and dad speak Portuguese. Are they Brazilian or Portuguese? Are you Portuguese yourself? We'll wait for him to come back on. I don't know what happened to his maybe his internet's choppy. I don't know. Oh, okay. Angolan. Okay, I see. I don't know what that is. I'm not gonna lie. I'm acting like I do know. I ain't gonna lie, chat. My head hurts. I want to eat something. Nah, that's wild. My bad, bro. My bad. I want to go to confession again. I gotta go to confession probably today. Wait, what's today? Saturday. Bro, I'm excited. I'm gonna eat the Eucharist today, bro. Let's get it. He said, Angola is African country, bro. Bro, how am I supposed to know, chat? Bro, I did not know that. I did not know that, bro. I ain't gonna lie. I kind of feel dumb for that, but bro's crying. He put the crying emoji, bro. Listen, I did not know that that was from Africa. But like, how do they speak Portuguese? Is that like what's it called? I forgot how to say this in English. Is that a place, a region? That's what it's called. A region that speaks Portuguese. Bro thinks he's a streamer. Bro, I've been streaming since bro, come on, bro. I've been streaming since last year, bro. What are you talking about? Talking about some chat. Bro, chat, bro. Look, you're responding, bro. Yeah, chat. What's up, chat? Bro, it feels cool just saying that. It's actually funny. Y'all better go to church today, bro. Y'all better go to church. I ain't gonna lie. Monkey. Oh my goodness. Of course. Of course this person is calling me monkey. Nah, I'm violating. What you mean? Oh yeah, I know you are, bro. I know you are. Bro's a menace to society, I ain't gonna lie. That's crazy. Hey, Bazan, eu falo um pouco português também. Assim, eu falo espanhol também. I don't know like if you can keep up with that, bro, but hey, they had Portuguese colonies there. Okay, that's what I thought because I was about to say, why did my comment just pop up on my screen? Because I put it on the screen. I decided to do that. I pretty much do that. I'm not gonna do it to every chat though. I can keep uh I can keep up, bro. Okay, okay, okay. What happened to the discussion? So the discussion was rolling right now, but my friend here, Jenga, pretty much had to yeah, I don't know what happened actually. He was like talking and we are answering this guy's question, but you know, yeah, I did decide to do that. Yo, Jenga, estás para atrás, bro, que la gente anda esperando, bro.
You okay, hear me?
Yo, yeah, it's answered. I remember teaching Jenga while I was at work, bro. He was giving me a hard time. That's crazy. Yo, chat, you gotta stop violating Jenga, bro.
I don't remember this.
Okay, monkey, hayati wallah.
Mm-hmm.
Esa es mi novia, la que está ahí.
Okay.
Yasi.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah, es mi novia.
Oh, okay. Monkey. Okay. I think I might know.
Bro, she's always calling me though. I don't know why.
Probablemente conocerla en, ¿cómo se dice? What was it? That little chat server we used to use.
No, no, ella no está en Discord. La conocí en otro lado.
No, 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 no. What was he? Zubo? Not Yubo. What was it called?
No, no. Clubhouse.
Clubhouse?
Yeah. Mexic Mexicans turning up now, bro. We've been turning up, chat. What do you mean, chat? Bro, it sounds so cool saying chat. I ain't gonna lie, bro.
I'm dead. It seems like that's all the questions.
Yo, sabes que yo voy a estar en México para la próxima semana y después creo que voy a ir a DR, bro.
Mm, I wish I could join you, man.
Bro, we gotta hang out soon. You gotta come for real,
I
for
really
real.
do. You're right.
Once you come, bro, yeah, we finna go out, bro.
For real. En serio. No, no soy mexicano. Soy dominicano.
Bro, no importa si eres mexicano o no, bro. Ya tú sabes, bro. Eres bienvenido a México
Sí.
anytime, bro. Sir.
No somos la
Jenga's
misma.
Mexican?
No.
Nah, Jenga's not Mexican. He's Dominican. But all Latinos are kind of the same thing. You know what I mean?
Except for the, what's it called? The Chileans.
Yeah, 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 yeah. We don't like Chileans. You're right. You're right.
No,
Yeah,
we don't like
you're right.
Chileans.
So true. So true. Base Dominican. Ya tú sabes, Dominicano.
Let's see, ya tú sabes, maní.
Yes, sir. We have a
Why
question
is
in
the
the
Pope
chat
not
though. He
required to learn
says,
Hebrew, according Greek? Wouldn't it be better to interpret the Bible? The Pope's not
yeah,
required because he's not the sole principle of interpretation. That's not the Pope's job. The Pope's job is simply to declare those matters of doctrines to be sufficiently explicit as a deposit of faith. Same thing with the ecumenical councils. If I were to say, oh, why don't we just need it? Why is the ecumenical council not required to learn Hebrew or according Greek? Obviously, everyone will understand this to be something very dumb, because the object of the ecumenical council is not to interpret the scriptures in every which way, but to set a right standard of the matters of faith by which our interpretation is supposed to be kept in mind.
yes, sir. This dude said, bro, I remember teaching Jenga Dembo.
Yo, this guy, somebody, somebody get that guy.
Somebody get this guy, bro.
Oh my god.
He's probably in the beat like, hey, ya tú sabes, que lo que.
Oh, y me recuerdo cuando te enseño bachata.
Yeah, bro. Hey, guys, I ain't gonna lie. I showed Jenga how to dance bachata, bro. He was my son on that.
Yo, yo, these guys, but yo, end the
Yo,
stream, dude.
Yo, yo,
End the
yo,
stream.
chill. Hello, okay, mommy. Bro, that's how Dominicans sound too.
Que lo coman, like that.
Yeah, yeah, like that. Yeah, you guys sound like that. I ain't gonna lie, bro. I think the best Spanish accent, though. No, no. Let's go from the worst Spanish accent. The worst Spanish accent of all time is definitely the Spanish from Spain. I don't care. I said it.
It doesn't even sound like Spanish, to be honest, bro.
Facts, facts. Yeah, it does not.
Sounds
That
pretty.
is that's the worst Spanish from Spain. I'm not this. Oh my goodness, no. I ain't
Mm-mm.
gonna lie. Latin Americans perfected the. You know how they say the British people made English, but the Americans perfected it. The same thing happened here with the Latinos. Because honestly speaking, bro, the British accent is hard. That's not even English, bro. I can understand
Why
it.
you dissing the British?
Why are you dissing the British fam? In it, fam.
Actually, it was the Australians who perfected it.
So the Australians, yeah, Australian is good.
Right, mate. You already know we prefer it.
Hey, brother.
Hey,
Hey,
bro.
brother. Brother. We need to teach the Australians and British people English. They still need to learn English. Look, British accents on top. Oh, you're British, Augustine. What's up, man? What's up, man? Good to see you. British accent on top. So I'm assuming you're from England. Oh man, bro got the real English accent. I ain't gonna lie.
I can't do that, man. I start getting my brain start hurting.
I don't know how to speak the British accent right.
I start getting mad for no reason.
Oh, indeed, I am British. God bless you, bro. I ain't gonna lie. That's what's up, though. Are you Orthodox or Catholic? I know you have Byzantine icon, so I don't know if you're a Byzantine Catholic or a Latin Catholic with a Byzantine icon, or you're Eastern Orthodox or something. I have no idea, bro. I could imitate this British accent so well, but the thing is, but that British accent that I have, it's actually kind of funny. It's I'm not gonna do it right now because I will only do it for like the boys. You know what I mean? Catholic. Okay, that's what's up. Dominicans in New York are turned up. I heard, but there's so many Dominicans in New York. I'm not in New York, but I heard there's so many Dominicans. So I know I had like so many friends from Dominican Republic that obviously live with me, but not with me in the house. But you know what I mean,
Right.
bro. What's a traditional Dominican food? I don't even know that. Is it like arroz con habichuela, like the same thing as los puertorriqueños? Or what?
Arroz con habichuela con, ¿cómo se dice? Queso frito, huevo frito,
Yeah,
yuca, a
yeah,
veces salchicha y salami frito
yeah.
uh,
Okay, okay.
y demás.
He says I would never be Eastern heterodox. Gotta make sure. Gotta make sure. I don't know. You know, it's funny. I wanted to make a video, a live stream. I want to say something with someone based. Yeah, I know based, bro. I wanted
You
to
want to
do
make
this
our next
Jenga
live
with
stream on the? You want
huh?
to make our next live stream on Eastern Orthodox?
Yeah, I want to do a next live either with you or some other people. I have some other collab, or we can all join up. It could be like a live stream with the boys. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Um, yeah. So they Hindu, bro. I'm not gonna lie. I have Eastern Orthodox brothers. If y'all are watching my stream right now, you know who y'all are. The ones I've been recently in contact with. I love y'all. I really do. I hope you guys come to Catholicism because I do think there's some problems in Eastern Orthodoxy. But I will say this: I want to make a live stream with the homies. You know what I mean? And with the bros and you included. Obviously, tú eres mi hermano, bro. You know how it is. So, I want
Mm.
to make that live stream with the boys, and we're gonna be talking about probably the filioque. It's gonna be a filioque arguments and why the Eastern Orthodox position. I think I just don't agree with it. I don't see it. And what's the problem with the essence energy distinction? I think that's going to be an interesting philosophical discussion right there. Very, very interesting right there. And I'm curious how I've talked to Jay Dyer. I think I'm not going to say this because he's going to block me, but I'll show you later what I'm talking about Jenga because like I had something, mira, lo voy a decir en español porque yo sé que él no habla español. Mira, tuve un debate con él en su servidor y está grabado un debate entre yo y él, literalmente. Y lo que pasó, lo que sucedió en ese debate es que él me prohibió que lo subiera a mi canal de YouTube. Dijo que si lo subiera me iba a bloquear y me iba a demandar. So, no lo puedo subir.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, it's kind of like, no sé ni qué hacer, no sé si retarlo y decirle, hey, hacemos un debate formal en una plataforma formal. No sé. What do you think?
Yeah, bro. I think that's a good idea.
Yes, sir. I ain't gonna lie, chat. After I get done with this live stream, well, I'm responding to this important person's message. So just give me one
Pero
second.
sí. Mm, and what was I gonna say?
Wait. While I write this message to someone, let's respond to this question. How come the use? Wait. How come the use temporal power of the church is used as proof of divine help to the Catholic Church, but not for the Muslims who spread through the same means?
We never use that as proof of the divine help to the church.
Too much longer, to be honest. So I was getting a message from somebody, especially like, how much longer are you gonna be on stream? I was like,
We
I
only
don't.
we only utilize it to show that one part was punished. For example, we often see that natural disasters occur in the scriptures because God is using it to punish another. We don't use you would never see any of us or any of those theologians utilize it to demonstrate that one church is true from there. As for especially with the Eastern Orthodox, if we look at Saint Bellarmine, Saint Alphonsus, and Charles Borromeo and the like concerning the feast of the Holy Spirit and the domination of the Turks over the Byzantines, they would simply utilize it to demonstrate that their beliefs were that they were punished for their false belief, but they would never utilize it to then therefore demonstrate that the church is true. Just like in the same way, we see in the case of the fifth century that the Latins were um, what's it called? The Romans were basically defeated by I think the Huns. I don't remember, but they were defeated in the time of Pope Saint Leo. This would probably at most demonstrate the punishment of the Latin Church, but not that the Latin Church is false.
Yes, sir.
Same thing
And
with
this is that's
Islam. Islam can utilize temporal powers just as we did with the Turks and the Byzantines as punishment of another sect.
yes, sir. Anyways, we do have otra persona. Sorry, I just spoke Spanish. I forgot y'all are not. Hey, sorry.
No
Uh,
problem.
my bad, my bad. We do have another person in the chat saying, "Oh, it's Malika." Bro, I'm so freaking distracted. I'm trying to read this thing. I think St.
Es la hora de
Robert
terminar
Bellarmine
el stream,
did
bro.
in the marks of. ¿Tú crees?
Sí, termina la transmisión.
Ya lo voy a terminar. First, let me just make someone a mod real quick, because
Okay.
put user.
Y mi igual.
I got you. I'll make you a mod. Here's the thing. Okay, so for people who want mod, okay, and Jenga, you included here. For people who want mod in my YouTube channel, I hope to be spending more time with you guys pretty soon. I have exciting, interesting information on what
No,
I
claro que
do. And
sí. Me intentara
Mhm.
unirse
More often.
mucho más transmisiones contigo.
Yeah, of course. So what he just said, I'll translate. He just said that he's going to try and join more of my live streams and stuff like that. We're going to be collaborating more. I have exciting YouTubers coming on platform as well, and a lot of information coming soon. So go ahead and follow my Twitter if you guys haven't. It's Fanatico Lulista. I'm going to be producing a lot of Spanish works into English as well and all that stuff. But anyways, if you guys want moderator, okay, for the people after I end the stream, listen closely. Even you, bro, Jenga, because it does not let me make you guys mod here. So after I end the stream, okay, there's going to be the normal chat to comment. Leave your comment there and I will make you mod there. That kind of rhymed. I don't know why, but hey, just do that. All right. So just leave your
Okay.
comment there and I will make you mod there. So we're probably gonna end the chat here. And after this, I'm finna eat some carrots, bro. Finna eat some of that.
Yo, my whole chat sent me. Yo, apparently white smoke has emerged. Ever since Pope Francis died, I have been praying for a Miaphysite Pope. I haven't
That's
counted, but it's
crazy.
probably around 70 times. Let's see if God has answered my prayer.
Ay, Dios mío. Oof.
Oh, bro.
Oof. I'm just gonna say this. After this, I'm finna do. Actually, Jenga, if you're free, we can after this stream you can call me. We can do the rosary if you want. We can pray, or unless if you have other stuff to do.
Yeah,
But
I could get you in the rosary in like 45 minutes after the stream.
let me know, bro. And then I have to go to church too, do the Eucharist, bro, all that stuff. So it's gonna be fun. But I'll probably live stream another time. I'll let you know another time we can hop on. Again, the Eastern Orthodox. Now, I'm sorry for the Eastern Orthodox Christians. I want to make the next live about that. So
Suena bien.
yeah. So, anyways, God bless you guys. Take care. Dios los bendiga. Y que manténganse rezados, eh? All right, bro. See you, bro.
Peace be with you. God bless. Bye.